This is VCT Americas Stage 1 Playoffs Preview. We're going to be starting the video by previewing all the teams, talk about how their Stage 1s have gone, and then we're going to get into my Pickems and look at how I think the bracket is going to shake out. So this is the board we have today. We have all 8 teams here. We will be starting with the top seeds of each group, the 2 teams that are awaiting the winners of the first round, which means we're starting with G2, the team that has unequivocally been the best team in the entire region all 2025. G2 have done very well in the Americas region, also doing well internationally, going very deep at VCT Masters Bangkok, going to the grand final, but unfortunately for them, they could not get that done. So after that tournament for other teams in the region, they were probably hoping that G2 would be a bit tired and not have as much prep for the next stage as other teams, but that did not end up being the case. G2 are still very much the best team in this region. It's not even much of a contest. They're undefeated in their own region, but how long is that going to go for? Is this playoff bracket going to feature this team's first loss in the Americas? We will see. Looking at their stage 1, as I've said, it's been amazing. They have a 5-0 record. They are undefeated. Their maps are 10 wins to 3 losses, and their round differential is a very impressive plus 41. In terms of their best map, it's easily Lotus. They have a 9-0 record on it. Attack win percentage is 65%, and defense is 65 as well. So 2 very elite numbers on both the sides there. I don't know why any team has been taking this team to Lotus. They're undefeated on it, and I don't know if I see them losing on it anytime soon. In terms of looking at their overall map pool, I decided to put down each team's amount of winning records on maps and their losing records. Looking at all the maps in the active map pool, so maps that are out of it do not count in this counting. And G2 have a winning record on 5 out of the 7 maps in the map pool right now, and only have a losing record on 1. So very impressive work from them. It's hard to choose a map that this team is going to be weak on. Even with Ascent coming in, they've looked very strong on that map. So it's hard to choose a map to counterpick this team to. And when the map pool eventually changes, it does look like it's going to be pretty beneficial to them. They were good on Sunset last year, so maybe that continues into this year. In terms of their MVP, I mostly went off of which player had the best rating, and Joggermo does have the best rating out of G2. He has a rating of 1.17. He's been impressive all year, giving this team that superstar duelist player that they were lacking last year, and now it's given them a whole new look. They can play a lot more aggressive while still playing that disciplined defensive style that worked so well last year. I also decided to track the power rankings history of all these teams. So for those that don't know, I do weekly America's Power Rankings. I did one before kickoff and then after kickoff, and then I did one each week of stage 1, and G2 have been at the number 1 spot for all 7 rankings that I've done so far. So yes, that means I believe that this team was going to be the best in the region before the season got started, and so far I've been pretty validated in that they have not dropped below that number 1 spot. So G2 still look amazing. It's hard to find a matchup in this region that they could lose. They did of course have 3 games that did go to 3 maps, the closest one of those being against C9, but Mibr did a very good job as well. Leviton did take a map off of them, but then that 3rd map was pretty much all G2, and Leviton isn't here right now, so I could see maybe C9 getting an upset win over them. However, I do think G2 are going to be able to clean up some of the mistakes that they were making on that Haven map, which C9 beat them on. This team still looks phenomenal. They should be a lock to make it to Toronto, but of course nothing is guaranteed. So hopefully their winning streak isn't getting to their heads and they lock in for these matches. I think this team does a pretty good job of keeping their egos in check, but we'll see if that continues during the playoffs. Moving on to the second top seed to talk about, we have Kru, a team that has had a pretty solid run in stage 1 so far, but not without its down points. They do have a 4-1 record overall, but their only loss was against Evil Geniuses, a team that many considered to be one of the worst teams in the region. Kru did look pretty out of sorts during that match, so it could just chalk up to these players had a bad day. However, the reality with this team is they've been in this position before. During stage 1 in 2024, they also had quite a good run. However, they did collapse during that playoff bracket. They did not make it to Shanghai. So this team is going to hope to not repeat the sins of the past and make it to a 2nd international during the year. We know they'll probably going to be at champs. They're at every single one. However, they haven't been to more than 1 international per year since, I believe, 2022. So is this version of this Kru roster, which does look like one of the best versions they've ever had, is this the team that gets that done? In terms of maps, they've won 8 during stage 1, they lost 4, and they have a round differential of plus 14. In terms of their best map, they've had a very impressive record on Icebox. They have a 3-0 record on it. Attack win percentage is 68%, defense is 59. So they're elite on that map. Bind probably would have been their best map too, but that map is of course out of the rotation. However, I will say that there are some concerning signs when it comes to Kru's overall map pool. They do have a winning record on only 1 active map, and they have a losing record on just 1 map, which means the rest of them, they have an even record record on. Haven, Split, Fracture, Pearl, Lotus, all maps that they have even records on, so they've won as many as they've lost on it. So I don't really know what that tells me about their overall map pool. Are they just like good to okay on every other map? Icebox, of course, is quite dominant for them so far. They've historically been very good on that map, but is only having one map that you have a winning record on, is that concerning, especially for a team that is top of their group? I don't really know. It is kind of a confusing stat when it comes to this team. In terms of their MVP, I put Mazzino down. He had a rating of 1.12, and in terms of this team on the power rankings, it's overall been pretty good, usually staying within the top 5 of the Americas. They started the year at 5th. I moved them up to 4th after their good run at kickoff. They stayed at 4th for the first week, then they moved up to 3rd. That was after their win against Sentinels, very impressive win that kept them in the 3rd place spot the next week. However, then they lost to Evil Geniuses, which did drop them down to 6th, but then they got that win over 100 Thieves, so I moved them back just up 1. So what that tells me is this team has been overall quite consistent. They've been about where I've expected them to be, and have also been pretty effective. However, there are just a couple things about this team that do get me kind of nervous. That round differential plus 14 is good, but it's not great. For a team that's top of their group, you would definitely expect that to be a bit higher, but that is quite low because of their loss against Evil Geniuses. And while they did end their stage strong against 100 Thieves, I don't know if that EG match is a sign of bad things to come. For now, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that this team is good. However, they are going to have a pretty hard bracket. We'll get to who their potential opponents are later, but for now, I think Kru are a good team, but are they good enough to be top 3 in the region and make it to Toronto? We will see. Moving on to one of the 2 matchups that we know is happening, we have Sentinels versus C9. Very important match right here. 2 teams that have a lot of question marks when it comes to them. C9 performing quite well during stage 1, getting a lot of very good wins, and then their 2 losses have been very close losses against very good opponents. So there are a lot of good signs there, but maybe some concerning things. But I want to talk with Sentinels, because this is a team that I have been believing in this year, but in terms of stage 1, it's been a while since they've been truly tested. They started their stage against 100 Thieves, a matchup that they do always win, and that history was repeated, but then they had that unfortunate loss against Kru, but then after that they didn't lose a single matchup. They did have a close one versus Loud, but they were able to get that done and dominate both Evil Geniuses and 2Game. So even though this team has had a really strong run and does look like a better version of themselves than what we saw in Bangkok, the opponents that they've been facing are admittedly not as strong as the team that they're going to be facing has. In terms of record, they have a 4-1 record on the stage. In terms of maps, they've won 8, they've lost 4. The round differential is the highest of the entire Americas right now, at plus 47. So that's actually a very good number and shows that they have actually dominated quite a few opponents. In terms of the best map, it's still Split, carrying over from a strong 2024 on that map. They have an attack win percentage of 58%, defense is 64. Very elite on that map. Try to avoid this team on Split if you can. In terms of active maps that they have winning records on, they have 2 of them. Split, of course, being one of them, and then Pearl is that second one. Lotus, which was a very good map for them last year, has not been great for them. They have a 2-4 record on that map. That's one of the 2 maps that they have a losing record on. So having a winning record on 2 maps is good. That means you have 2 strong maps that you can take teams to. And some of those maps that they have losing records on, it's only like they've played them once and then they lost it. That's the same for a lot of these teams. But I still think it's an interesting enough point to put it down for all these teams to see how the map pools are looking still fairly early in the year. In terms of their MVP, I put Narrate down. He does lead the team in rating with a very impressive 1.26. A couple weeks ago, I made a video about players that I thought were struggling, and I put down Zelsis for Sentinels, but I got some comments saying that it should have been Narrate. But Narrate had just come off of a very good match, then continued to, I think, top frag for this team, aside from against 2Game, I think it was Zekin instead. But Narrate has looked a lot better recently. I think he's starting to, find his footing with this team. Yes, there's of course the talk about how he handles his emotions and all that stuff, but we don't really know how he's dealing with that. We can't psychoanalyze him. But what I will say about Narrate is he is looking a lot better than he did early in the year. He has been struggling with consistency issues, but he's looked quite consistent lately. In terms of this team on my power rankings, they started the year at 3rd. Then, of course, being the 2nd place team at kickoff, I moved them up to that 2nd place spot. And then to start the stage 1, they were 3rd after week 1. However, then they lost to Kru, which then moved them down to 4th and moved Kru up to 3rd. And then they stayed at 4th the next week. However, once Kru dropped, they did move back up to 3rd. So that was mainly just due to Kru having one bad week. And I have been getting comments on those power rankings videos saying that I should put C9 above them, but we don't really know which team is better until we see them head to head. Yes, C9 have had some close games, I'll talk about those in a bit, but Sentinels have been on a strong run. So this matchup being one of the opening matches to start playoffs, I think is amazing. Very poetic matchup indeed. Two classic organizations in Valorant. One has been to internationals quite a few times, and one is trying to get over their demons of struggling during these playoff situations. Overall, I don't think anyone should count out Sentinels. I know they've had some pretty easy opponents, but this is a team that knows how to make it to international tournaments. They won Madrid last year, they didn't make it to Shanghai, but then they got very close to winning champions. They were top 4 in that tournament. Then of course they made Bangkok after looking kind of mediocre at the start of kickoff, so I think they just have to kind of get their stuff together. I think they've been looking a lot better. Junk UT is hitting, Zekin's starting to heat up as well. This team is dangerous, and we know that they can make it to internationals. We know there's going to be a lot of fans behind them. Do not count this team out. I know they might look not as good as they used to, but I still am a believer in this team, especially considering that their opponent has had some issues when it comes to playoffs. Which moves us on to C9, a team that has admittedly looked quite good during Stage 1. This part of the year historically goes very well for C9. They're always good in these round-robin group stages. Dating back to 2023 and even years prior, this team usually does very well in these situations. However, they have not made an international tournament since 2021, aside from Locken, of course. Going back to 2023, this team looked like potentially the best team in their whole region, and then they just fell apart during playoffs. And then in 2024, they had a good run and then immediately lost the opening match, which was a single elimination for them. So maybe that was them just getting unlucky through the format, but then in Stage 2, they fell apart as well. So we're at that point in C9's pattern that they look really good during this stage, but now we're at the point where they usually collapse. So can they avoid that from happening and get the win over Sentinels? Well, let's look at how their Stage 1 went. In Stage 1, they had a record of 3-2. Their maps, they won 8, they lost 5, and they have a round differential of plus 33. A lot of talk about those two losses. So they were against G2 and Mibr, both games very close, went to 3 maps. Impressive comeback against Mibr on that Lotus map to get it to overtime, and they were 1 round away at one point, and then Verno ended up saving Mibr in that overtime, and then they won it. And then on map 3, C9 had to do another comeback, but this time they couldn't tie it and get it into overtime. And then against G2, similar story, they got kind of destroyed on that first map, but then they destroyed G2 on Haven. I will say that that's a combination of C9 looking quite good during that map, very intense and oppressive attack side to get them that very good lead. And G2 were definitely having an off map there. They were missing a lot of shots they usually don't. So it's a combination of two things, but I will give C9 the credit that they did look great. However, while people have been praising this team for those close losses, I do think that we need to kind of calm down a bit about it. Yes, those 2 losses were very close against top teams, but what that tells me is that this team can hang with the best. They can make those matches very close, but they haven't proven that they can beat the best teams in the region yet. They have feasted upon teams that are in the lower part of their group, destroying all 3 of Leviathan, Energy, and Furia. However, when it comes to those top teams, they have struggled to close out those matches. So yes, it's impressive that they made them close, but at the end of the day, you need to win those games. So that's one thing that does kind of make me pause on this team, is like, okay, they can make them close, but can they win them? In terms of their best map, they've looked quite good on Fracture during this stage. They have a 2-0 record on it. Their attack win percentage is amazing. 2-0 record on it, so they've only played it twice, but the attack win percentage is an impressive 84%, and defense is 44%, so the defense side definitely needs some cleaning up there. However, it is only 2 times playing that map, so maybe that number will get better as they play it more. This team has 4 maps that they have a winning record on, 2 of them being only playing them once. So overall map pool does look pretty good for them. Again, they've only played a couple maps once or twice, so we'll see how deep this map pool really goes. In terms of their MVP, it's gotta be Vic. He has a rating of 1.22. He's looked incredible so far. And in terms of this team on the power ranking, it's been all over the place, but they definitely could have been higher at points. I started them off in the preseason at the number 10 spot, and then I kept them there after kickoff. Yes, they got a decent upset win over Energy, but then they lost to G2 and then lost in the lower bracket. So it didn't impress me enough to make me think that they should have been higher than 10th at that time, but then they did end up moving to 6th place. They would then move up to 5th place, but then I dropped them back down to 6th place after losing to Mibr. Got a lot of comments saying that that was too harsh, and I did eventually agree to that, so I moved them back up to 4th place the next week, and then they ended the Stage 1 round robin at the same spot. I just didn't feel like that I could move them up after a loss. Yes, it was a close loss, but I felt like still, 4th place spot, this team still has a lot to prove. Just because they had 2 close matches against 2 really good teams doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be one of the best teams in the region. They have to win those matches against those top teams to prove to me that they're legit. So this team does admittedly look quite good. I do think this is probably the best version of C9 that we've seen in quite some time. They have some incredible talent on their team in Vic. Oxy is starting to heat up as well. Mitch looks like a pretty good choice for IGL for them, and Zeppa looks really good, honestly. Probably one of the more underrated players in the league right now. However, as I've stated, this team typically collapses at this point in the year, so I think if there's any chance for them to break that trend, it is this roster, so we will see how that ends up going. Sometimes esports just has these weird patterns that always end up happening, like Sentinels beating 100 Thieves, but maybe C9 can finally break the pattern. Moving on to the second matchup that we have to talk about, we have Mibr versus 100 Thieves. Now this is a matchup that has already happened in the year so far. Mibr and 100 Thieves started their kickoff against one another. Pretty lopsided 2 maps. The second map was a little bit better for Mibr, but not by much. However, that was a long time ago, and this Mibr team looks a lot different than they did then. They have looked incredible during stage 1. They only have 1 loss in the entire round robin. That of course was to G2, and that one was close, as I've already talked about. And their 4 wins, some have been a bit harder than others, but overall they are able to close out those games. Looking quite good against C9. They did blow a lead in that match, so that is one thing that I do look at this team and does concern me. They do have a tendency to blow leads here and there, but they also are very good in overtime. They're so far undefeated in overtime this year, so that is a good sign that even if they can lose a big lead, they still have the mental fortitude to be like, all right, we just got closed out now. Doesn't matter how much of a lead we had before, we just got to win. So that's definitely a good sign, and they've shown resilience when things get tough, like when Fury won a map, they actually started to heat up in that second half, and of course weathering the storm that was C9. Their overall record in stage 1 is 4-1. In terms of maps, they've won 9, they've lost 4. In terms of round differential, they've a plus 32, very impressive number there. In terms of their best map, it could be Pearl as well, but they have a perfect record on Icebox so far, so I put it down. Attack win percentage is 89% on that map, defense is 61. Incredibly impressive attack win percentage there. They've only lost 2 rounds on attack so far. That is just deadly. Avoid this team on Icebox if you can help it. In terms of amount of maps that they have a winning record on, they have 4 of them. However, they do have a losing record on 2 maps, that is Ascent and Lotus. Lotus they are looking better on than they did early in the year, but they still have a 1-4 record on, so they do have some things to clean up about that map. But overall, their map pool does look pretty impressive, especially with the team with as many rookies as they have. In terms of their MVP, I put down Ospos. He was tied with Verno in rating, but I just feel like Ospos is just the lifeblood of this team. In terms of rating, he has a 1.18, which isn't the highest for Ospos. It's actually on the lower end when you look at his previous stats. He's usually top 3, top 5 in rating, but not during stage 1. He isn't having as good of an individual performance as he has had on previous rosters, but honestly, that's okay. I think he doesn't have as much responsibility as he did on those other rosters. He's not the only one that can frag out on this team. Verno, Cortesia, and Genom have shown that they can do that, and his IGL is doing a very good job at calling. Artson has been great for this team. In terms of the power ranking, they've actually been incredibly consistent. Before the year started, I started them at 4th. I felt like, yeah, they do have some rookies, but Ospos is always going to be on a good team. And while the start of kickoff didn't go well for them, they ended up having a good run, so I did move them up to the 3rd place spot. And then after week 1 of stage 1, I bumped them up to the 2nd place spot. Got some comments about that, but it was validated pretty quickly. And then they stayed at the 2nd place spot until the end of the stage. Having some impressive wins, they could have been at number 1 if it not for the fact that G2 is just undefeated. So they end up staying in that 2nd place spot. And I do believe that this team is the 2nd best team in the region. They've beaten almost everybody that they've faced. They've only lost 3 matches this entire year so far. The team looked really good at kickoff, but still clearly had some things to figure out. That makes sense for a team with 2 rookies, now 3. But during stage 1, they've shown that they can be a very dominant team. Cortesia looks like one of the best rookies in the entire region. Genom is up there as well, and Verno has been looking incredible. Looking like Energy just gifted this team one of the best young players in the entire Americas. However, playoffs is not going to be an easy thing for them to get through. They do have a tough bracket. 100 Thieves is a team that has already beat them. I do think Mibr are favored in this matchup, but 100 Thieves have already shown that they could beat them, so I think Mibr is going to have to go out there really wanting revenge, and if they play angry and play determined, I think they can win that one. However, 100 Thieves, while they have had their up and downs this season, are no slouch. Not the most impressive stage 1 that we've seen from them, but it's not without its bright spots. Cryocells is still the top rated player in the entire VCT Americas right now. He's been there for for, I believe, most of Stage 1. He's looked absolutely incredible. They have one of the best players in the entire region right now. That's a very good thing to have. He has helped drag this team to some of the wins that they've gotten this stage. They do have some players underperforming right now. Xander has not replaced Bane in the way that I think this team would have wanted him to. Obviously, he's not the same player, but Bang is doing quite well on Sentinels, and Xander has looked pretty pedestrian. Boostio as well as an individual just has not been performing up to snuff. He's one of the lowest rated players in the entire Americas. And Asuna, he's been good, but still inconsistent. I think at this point, that's just what Asuna is. He's a player that does have a lot of talent. He can look very good and get some incredibly impressive frags, but he doesn't know how to put it together 24/7. In terms of the record during Stage 1, they have a 3-2 record on it. I believe that's the same record that they had last year in Stage 1. In terms of maps, they've won 7, they've lost 5, and they have a round differential of -5. So they've lost more rounds than they've won, partially due to that loss against both Sentinels and Kru. In terms of the best map, I was gonna put Lotus because they're actually undefeated on that map technically, but they haven't played it since kickoff, and now it's their permaban, which is kind of interesting to me. Maybe they end up playing against MIBR because MIBR haven't always been great on that map. So I decided to put down Haven. They have a 2-1 record on it. Attack win percentage is 64, defense is 44, so they're quite poor on defense, but attack does make up for it. In terms of amount of maps that they have a winning record on, it's actually pretty impressive. They have 5 maps. Now some of those are 2-1 or 1-0, but still having 5 maps that you've won more than you lost, that is a good thing. And they only have 1 map where they have a losing record on, that is Pearl. They have a 0-3 record on it, so MIBR being very good at that Pearl map, maybe MIBR takes 100 Thieves there. Would not be surprised if we saw that unless 100 Thieves ban it. In terms of their MVP, already talked about Cryocells. He has a rating of 1.33. He's looked incredible. This is his 3rd year on this team. He is playing for some kind of international appearance. He only got a little bit of a taste of it at Shanghai last year, but this guy really wants to make it. In terms of the power rankings, they've kind of been all over the place. For the most part, in the lower half of the rankings for me, I started them at 7th. I felt like that was a fair placement. They didn't make many roster changes, but they kind of downgraded when they got Xander. Then after going out pretty early in kickoff, I dropped them down to 8th. That might have been pretty low at the time, but felt like it was fair. And they did impress me to start Stage 1 with their loss against Sentinels, where they lost map 3 13-1, which that dropped them down to 9th place. They then would move up to 6th place after getting their first win. Then I moved them up 1 more to 5th place. They stayed there for 2 weeks in a row, but then after losing 2-0 to Kru, dropped them back down to 7th. So I do think this team is one of the more lower end teams in playoffs right now. Are they better than, say, Evil Geniuses? Probably, but they have the same record as them. They did beat them in that head-to-head matchup, which is why 100 Thieves are above EG in the standings. But overall, I just don't know how much I trust this team to go on a run. I know they were able to do it during Stage 1 playoffs last year. That was a bit of a surprise run, but this team just doesn't look as pristine as they did during that stage. There's a chance that this team gets their stuff together and goes on a run and does make it to Toronto. They've done it before, they can do it again, but I don't think I see it happening. I do think they probably lose to MIBR. However, this team's going to hope that history does repeat itself and they can get that win. Moving on, we have the lower seeds that we have to talk about. Evil Geniuses is the first one. Ended up having a pretty solid end to their stage after what looked like a pretty mediocre to bad part. While they did get 1 win over 2 games, the matches that they lost were pretty poor. Getting dominated by both Sentinels and 100 Thieves, looked like this team had a pretty decent shot at missing playoffs. However, because 2 games was pretty bad and Loud was on a losing streak, they did have a chance at stealing that spot if they were able to beat Kru, which a lot of people didn't pick them to win that one, but they ended up getting it done. Not only beating them, but kind of dominating them during that entire match. That was the best that they've looked all year. Potter's coaching seems to be finally getting through for this team. That win locked up their playoff spot, which did mean that they didn't have to win their matchup versus Loud. However, they did it anyway. Very close match there. While Loud probably played better for the majority of that match, Potter's coaching and some very good play by Ye and Superman kept this team in that match, and they were able to get those 2 map wins. So this team is starting to heat up heading into playoffs, and I don't think a lot of people expected them to make it here. They didn't look great at kickoff, and then their stage 2 when they lost has been pretty bad. But they got the 3 wins, you gotta give them that respect, and they've looked pretty good doing it. Their overall record is 3-2, same as 100 Thieves, but again, they lost that head-to-head, so they're below them. In terms of maps, they've won 6, they've lost 5. In terms of round differential, it's better better than 100 Thieves, a -1. Looking at the best map so far, it's been Lotus. They have a 2-1 record on it. Attack win percentage is 67% and defense is 52. Pretty solid record on that map. However, that is the only map that they have a winning record on. Most of the maps in the pool they have a tied record on or just haven't played them. They have a losing record on 2 maps. So overall, I don't really know what that tells me about their overall map pool. It does tell me that it needs some work. In terms of their MVP, Superman has had some very strong matches here, looking very good. He's a rating of 1.05, very good number for a player that I think at this point is pretty underrated. In terms of the power rankings, it's usually been pretty bad for this team this year. I started them at 9th, thought that was a fair place to put them, and it did end up kind of continuing on until after kickoff. I started them at the 10th spot after week 1 of stage 1, so they did drop 1 spot despite getting a win over 2 game. It was more of a situation of them getting past, but then they lost their next 2 matches, which meant they were at 11th for 2 weeks in a row. However, then they won against Kru, so I bumped them up quite a bit after that one. They were in the 8th place spot, and then they won against Loud, so I was impressed with that one, so I moved them up to that number 6. So overall, this team does look like one of the weaker teams heading into this playoff bracket. They are in the single elimination part of this bracket, so if they lose once, they're out. I think a lot of people are doubting this team. However, as I've stated in previous videos, this is a position that Potter has been in before. A team that doesn't necessarily look the greatest during the stage, but then starts to heat up by the end of it. Could they do what 2023 EG did and end up almost winning that entire bracket? I do find it unlikely, but this team does have some talent. If they put it all together, coupled with Potter's coaching, this team isn't in the worst position. I like what I've seen from them so far. I do think they probably lose out. However, this team can make a fight out of it. I will be proud of them, and don't expect this team to just be pushovers. Moving on to the last team we have to talk about, we have NRG. This team looked like an absolute disaster during most of stage 1. Not only that, but also had a pretty mediocre kickoff after having one of the best off seasons of the entire VCT. They came into the year with a lot of high expectations, and kickoff did not go their way. Some people were giving them the benefit of the doubt after that, but then stage 1 started and things didn't get much better. Starting their stage off with a loss against C9. C9 ended up being a good team, so whatever. Then they lost the map to Furia, but then dominated on the 2nd and 3rd maps, so whatever, doesn't matter. But then they had 2 matches in a row where this team got absolutely destroyed. First by G2 losing 13-1 and then 13-6, and then against Mibr losing 13-6 and then 13-5. So this team not even breaking more than 6 rounds in a map for 4 straight maps. I know those 2 teams are good, but that is an absolute disaster. You cannot be performing that poorly. So that put them in a position where they were fighting against Leviton for that final spot of playoffs. A lot of people were taking Leviton, including myself, but NRG got it done. To their credit, they actually played quite well. They did get outplayed for most of that Fracture map, but then once they got it into overtime off of the back of some really strong play from Mata, this team was able to win it. And then they had a very good Icebox comp that just confused the hell out of Leviton, having 2 very good halves, not letting Leviton get much of anything going. So by the skin of their teeth, this team barely ends up making it to playoffs, with the worst record and stats in the entire bracket. They have a record of 2-3. The round differential is -15, worst on the board. So far, the best map has been Pearl. They have a 2-1 record on it. Attack win percentage is 56, defense is 65. So very strong numbers on defense, gotta give them credit where it's due. However, that is the only map where they have a winning record on. In terms of losing record, they have 2 maps with those. They're starting to look better on certain maps like Icebox, so that's good to see. Maybe this team has a deeper pool than what we think. In terms of their MVP, Mata did have a pretty rough start to the stage, but has started to heat up. He had an overall rating of 1.13, best on the team. Maybe people are thinking Som is the MVP, but Som started to quiet down after a very good start. In terms of the power rankings, they've been all over the place this year. They started at 2nd. I thought this team was going to be good, but I didn't think that they were going to be the best, so put them at the number 2nd spot, and then was immediately proven wrong, because they dropped down even lower. I had them at 7th after kickoff. Was not impressed with what I saw. Did not give them much benefit of the doubt there. Then after losing their opening match, dropped it down to the 8th spot. Did move them up 1 spot with that win over Furia, but didn't give them a ton of credit there. Then they got destroyed by G2. I felt like, okay, G2 is a really good team, best team in the region. They got destroyed, but that is such a good team. I will keep them where they are. And then after the loss to Mibr, I thought, all right, nope, not doing that again, and dropped them down to 11th. However, then they get the win over Leviton, move them up back to the number 8 spot. They are the last team in playoffs, so felt like number 8 is a fair place to put them. This team looked like in complete disarray during most of this stage. There was no way to cut it. They looked terrible. However, they looked decent in that match against Leviton. Mata's starting to look better. Ethan's looking pretty consistent right now. However, FNS is still just a liability out there, and I don't know know if his calling is making up for it at this point. They did get that win to just barely skirt into playoffs, so they proved that they're not like a terrible team. When this team can put everything together, I don't know what their ceiling is. Brock's starting to look better after a rough start as well, so again, there's things to like about this team, but just not enough that I think they're going to do very well. I do think this team is probably a first round exit. Depends on who they're matching up against. We will see how it goes for this team, but I don't have a ton of faith in them right now. Maybe they prove me wrong. Okay, so that is me talking about every team. Time to do my pick'ems. Gonna run through this fairly quickly. Mibr versus 100 Thieves. Do think Mibr win that one. Sentinels versus C9. I do think C9 should be the favorites for that one. However, I'm gonna say Sentinels start off with a bang. Moving down to the lower bracket here, 100 Thieves versus Energy. I'm gonna say Energy get what I would say is an upset win. Two teams that have had their struggles overall, but Energy did beat them in kickoff, so I could see that upset happening. C9 versus EG should be a pretty win for C9 there. Back to the uppers, Kru versus Mibr. Kru looking for revenge in that kickoff loss, but Mibr looking to qualify for the first international, I think, in organizational history. I'll say they do it. G2 versus Sentinels. G2 should make not quick work of Sentinels, but it should be a close match, but I do think they win that one. Kru versus C9, man, this would be a disaster for either team to go out. I will say that C9 get it done and win that one. Kru, I definitely have some concerns about. Sentinels versus Energy. Sentinels should make pretty quick work of that team, I think. G2 versus Mibr. Okay, this is where we're going to get a little bit crazy. I said G2's winning streak is going to eventually get broken. I'll say it's here. Sentinels versus C9, a rematch. Man, a rematch. Do Sentinels get it done again? Or does C9 qualify for their first international since 2021? I would believe in C9 to get it done. I am kind of favoring them again, but I don't know, man. Something about Sentinels, they just always find a way. Then we have G2 versus Sentinels. G2 wins that one. G2 end up winning the whole bracket to get revenge on Mibr. So, that is my bracket. Might be a little crazy, but honestly, any combination of these teams can be crazy. There are so many good teams in the Americas right now. I know teams like G2 look far above the rest, but honestly, there's just so much talent in this region. It's incredible to watch. There are, I think, realistically, 5 teams that have a chance to make it to Toronto. So we'll see how it all ends up shaking up, but for now, this is what I'm picking. Let me know what your brackets are. Let me know how much you disagree or agree with my bracket in the comment section down below. Hello, this is Kyle from the future. While he's editing this video, just want to mention one quick thing. I've now launched an Instagram. I now have an Instagram for this YouTube page, so go there and follow. I haven't made my first post yet, but I'm going to very soon. And then hopefully I'll be posting consistently on there. I do have a link to my Twitter as well, but I don't really tweet and I really just hate that website now. So I'm going to say just follow me there if you want to get semi-recent updates about everything and posts every, hopefully, couple days. Please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.